low to moderate income people that, you know, that are not able to purchase a home because they're getting bought out from investors from California. I had a call from somebody in Texas that had to do, you know, 10 units or $2 million, you know, in a weekend in homes to purchase them. So I know this is a big goal for the mayor, personally speaking. So we need to have people. I mentioned somebody, I sent an email to get a person that I know who's a realtor. She's not about it. She doesn't want to be on this committee for the business. She truly has a grasp on what's out there and she wants to help. She's interested in helping with research and data, and I really want to bring her on board. When I recommended it through email, I did not get a response. So I'd like to just, if we need to vote for it, but I really feel again that we need somebody that knows the market right now. Unless there's somebody right now that's on the committee that is out there lending and seeing what's actually happening. That I just wanted to say that, and please, I welcome any type of comments or suggestions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I would love to see people from the real estate industry maybe on this committee, as well as banks. I mean, I think those are all, if you have specific recommendations of specific people, or if anyone else does, I think that would be the most helpful.
Yes, yeah. I do. I have one person only.
Okay.
I don't, you have to be really, really careful. If I didn't know this person since junior high, I would not be recommending them. But been in this industry a long time. You just need to be really careful with the intentions of the person on this committee, on the committee and commission.
Well, but in you know, as it pertains to sort of first-time home buyer, I will say, so Family Housing Resources does do down payment assistance and works with first-time home buyers. Mm-hmm. So I think that having some sort of industry specialists would be very helpful, but I do also think that we have some representative here just in terms of on more the client facing side.
Right, agree.
Okay, great. I mean, I would love to leave it maybe open for the next few months until we really settle into things as to if we need to add more folks, if we feel like there's more expertise that's needed. I'm really open, and I think we can kind of leave that one open as we start to dive more into the nitty gritty. But I think that's a great place to start. The next item on the agenda was just making sure that this time of day, if we set this up every month to recur, is this time and date gonna work for everyone? I think this is what did we settle on? We're at the first Wednesday of every month.
And Shay, given the full commission meeting is tomorrow, I'm not sure how people feel about having those two meetings back to back.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should space them. I liked a Wednesday. It seems like it's kind of a good day, but maybe the second Wednesday or the third Wednesday of the month might work better moving forward. Can we get a vote on this? Maybe in the chat. I'm not sure.
I'm good with this third Wednesday of the month. That seems to kind of spread it out.
The third Wednesday, is that going to work for everyone? Can I make a motion that we vote on this? Can we vote to have the meeting here forward on the third Wednesday of every month?
So would that mean we're going to do 2 meetings the month of October?
I would skip for this month and then just state the new time, the new date in for November.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move. I don't know if you can do it as a chair, but I'll move to establish a regular monthly meeting on the third Wednesday of the month at 4:30 p.m. And we're projecting these meetings to take an hour and a half.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Was there a second? Marianne?
Yeah, second.
So that raises a question for me about who's voting in the committee, in the subcommittees. Is it just the appointed commissioners or everybody?
I don't know.
And I'll have to check on that. I'm not 100% sure. I know outside people can participate.
Right.
And of course, ex officio obviously can participate as part of the discussion. I'm not 100% sure. I'll check on that and let you know next time.
Is there anybody that this doesn't work for? Let's just ask the question.
Days don't work really well for me, either Monday or Wednesdays, but once a month I can probably make it work. So if I'm the only one with a problem.
Anybody else?
Hey, Jim, this is Jason. The afternoon is a little tough for me during the week, but other than that, the days don't matter.
Is there, Jason, I think you're a pretty critical component of this thing. Is there, I mean, would you rather do it early, or I don't know if that works with everybody else.
I can do it. I just probably there are times that I may be in transit, so I won't be actually with documents in front of me, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably all right.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I think the discussion is really the key piece. Is there, I mean, I personally also, I don't mind if it was earlier. I think the reason why we have them in the afternoons is so that more folks from the public could potentially attend. I think that was what we arrived at with the, you know, the larger commission, you know. But if during business hours work better for the majority of people, then I don't know, maybe that's okay too.
Business hours won't work for me. We are so busy with our day-to-day. Getting to even to this is difficult, but I made that commitment. And the other thing is, if this is a subcommittee, my experience on a subcommittee is that everybody who's a member on the subcommittee can vote. Anything that they bring to the table to an official committee is voted upon by that committee. And frankly, I don't want to be in a subcommittee that I don't have a vote, because that's my voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for the clarification. Again, I'm still getting familiar myself with Robert's rules, so my apologies. But yes, I agree. I think that's great. And it's everyone's time, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, let's keep it at 4:30 then, and we'll make it the third Wednesday of every month. It seems like that's gonna work for the majority of people. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. What do we have here? Which is a call to the audience. So we have one member of the public here. Does anyone want to speak? No, okay, so no one, so let's move forward. Oh, great, let's get into the subcommittee goals. So, yes.
Shay, I mean, it's totally up to you, but it might make more sense for me to do item 5, because I have some data and some information that might help in thinking about subcommittee goals for 4.
Great, let's do that.
Okay. So many of you have heard me now go on about the affordable housing strategy that mayor and council have asked housing community development to put together. And so I wanted to give some updates and really be honest that really hoping this subcommittee in particular, with the focus on affordable housing, can really provide as much input as you're comfortable, and really what I share today, if there are things that you feel like we might want to consider that we're not considering, or other ideas, please, 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 I'm really kind of leaning on the subcommittee as a key piece of the public engagement. So with that, wanted to share a few updates, and I'll share I'll share this information tomorrow with the full commission, but in terms of the strategies, thinking that over the next couple months, really would love more detailed input from this commission. The full commission, I think, will get the overviews, but hoping to dive deeper. So first thing, I'm going to put a link in the chat and share my screen is in terms of engagement. So Shay, you asked the question at the last subcommittee meeting, at the last commission meeting, are you really creating a plan in 90 days? And what about public engagement? And I appreciate that. And it's still been suggested that we go to council in the end of November with a draft. And this draft is going to evolve, and quite honestly, this plan is going to evolve. But just wanted to give you the time frame I'm working on is to take a draft to council the end of November. In terms of public engagement, we are planning on the last week of October hosting a couple different things. And so would love people on this subcommittee to help in terms of get the word out and get people to participate. And so I put a link in the chat. I'll also share my screen. This is what we're thinking. Again, this hasn't been shared yet. I'm actually planning on over the next couple of days, getting out some of this information to people. So we threw together a website that will evolve as the plan evolves. But in terms of public engagement right now, really focusing on that last week of October, to be able to get some thoughts together for mayor and council the end of November. So in terms of what we're thinking, definitely I want to invite developers, whether they're larger affordable housing developers or smaller incremental, people who are interested in the incremental work. Really hoping during the day to have a Zoom meeting that we can get some input on what we're putting together. Later that day, there'll be a virtual public meeting for anyone and everyone that wants to weigh in on the plan. And then the next day, Liz did ask that we do host an in-person opportunity for people to contribute. And so also trying to thread the needle where getting people at the end of their workday and also getting people if they can't participate as part of their workday. So those two will be 4:30 to 6:30. We are asking people to register in part for the in-person one, just to make sure with COVID that we'll have adequate space. And then for the Zoom ones, just trying to get a sense of how many to figure out how we should structure them. So that's the first thing wanted to share, that we are starting to think through what that engagement will look like. The next piece of information, this is, please know, draft. But yes, it's crazy to think we can put together a very good comprehensive plan in 90 days. And yet I will also say we've a lot of people on this call and for sure myself have been thinking about these things the past couple of years. We have the housing market study that was done recently. I feel like we do have a lot of the pieces in pulling them together. I'm a planner by background, and yet I hate nothing more than spending so much time and energy on words and prefer action. So I'm actually okay throwing something out there and kind of this idea of doing well planning. And so I've been working on a plan that's complete draft and open to feedback. And many of you were at the last commission meeting in which the woman who developed the Phoenix plan presented. And really, I'll say I've looked at a dozen cities' housing plans and really do think the Phoenix one seems to be the right model for us in terms of level of detail and the constraints that they have in Arizona. And so I'll say that a lot of this is taken from the Phoenix plan. So I'm going to share where I'm at right now, and we can talk, and don't hesitate to interrupt me as we go. And you know what? I'm also going to make sure, if I can, Shay, I'm going to try to make you a host in case people are joining. And Olga, I'm going to do the same. It's hard for me to do more than 2 things at once. Okay, so. Okay, sharing my screen for real. All right, so first thing, and again, these are anyone on here is welcome to jump in and tell me I'm crazy on some of this stuff. So one thing that stood out to me from the housing conference was this idea that if you talk about affordable housing, it is alienating to some people, and really preferring sticking with language around housing affordability, as it's something that we know everyone in our community, there's a lot of people that needing housing affordability solutions. So I am proposing that is the language we use. That said, if anyone has a creative short name that we may be able to use, like the Phoenix plan is Housing Phoenix, there's a million other plans. If anyone has recommendations on a plan name, let me know. But for now, we're going with housing affordability strategy for Tucson or HAST. This is in terms of what you will expect to see in the plan for now, our thinking is there'll be an intro, there'll be a section that summarizes the data that we are aware of in terms of housing. We do want to not throw away the work we just did with the People, Community, and Homes Investment Plan, and I'll talk more about that. In the mayor and council motion, they explicitly asked us to include information on funding sources that when it comes to affordable housing. And then they said they really wanted us to link those funding sources to short-term, middle-term, and long-term goals. And then last, we may have a section, Phoenix does not have a section on implementation, but they have been doing a lot. And so I'm going back and forth on whether or not we should do that. But jumping in, a lot of this was taken from what Liz did at council in terms of setting the stage. And I think some of this in terms of thinking about this being a housing affordability strategy, some of this language will need to change a bit, but I think there is still uncertainty what we mean by affordable housing. So this is from Liz's description to mayor and council. And then one thing that I want to make sure we do in this plan is have some definitions laid out. And so I feel like we are hearing people talk about affordable housing and workforce housing and mixed income housing, and I think there is some misconceptions or lack of clarity on what those terms mean. So in the plan, I do plan on doing a definition of terms, and as we work on putting that together, I'll want your input. And many of you know I come from a transportation background, and I thought transportation had a lot of acronyms, but they have nothing on HUD and acronyms. Liz presented this at mayor and council, and we've gotten a lot of feedback that it was helpful in terms of thinking about the different types of housing in terms of services and care. So I do think we'll include some version of this in the plan. And then in terms of the introduction, the other thing is I hate reinventing the wheel. We will touch on some of the things that have been going on and are in the works, and really open to ideas on what to include. I really want to keep this from being a very long document and just really focus on the goals, but I think it is important to at least highlight what's been going on. So that's the intro. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So then we know that the city worked with the county and University of Arizona on a housing market study, ton of information on that. The city also put together the Poverty and Urban Stress website with a ton of information. The People, Communities, and Homes Investment Plan does a deep dive on data. And so rather than reinvent all that, we're going to pull from the most relevant pieces of that. So here is what I am proposing at this time. And again, really open to thoughts on it. But, and one thing I will say to you, for the market study that we did with Pima County and U of A, it was focused on the county. Because this motion came from the city, I will say much of this data is focused, not this slide, but much of this data is currently focused on the city, since that's the where mayor and council have more authority, and yet if open to suggestions and thoughts on that. But so here is kind of the data story, how I see it. We know that, not surprising, population has been increasing in our region. And we also know that particularly since the recession, housing production has not kept up with that growth. And so we also know that incomes in Tucson are low, and I will say this data will look much better as it goes along, but just wanted to kind of data dump and get information in there in terms of what are the number of households in the different income categories in Tucson. And so we know that we have low incomes, which means we have very high poverty rates. And I think this really speaks to that not only does Pima County have higher poverty rates than Arizona, but Tucson's are pretty striking. And then housing costs. And I will say, I just downloaded some data from, one caveat I'll say is, with all of this, it's hard to get accurate, up-to-date current data. And so I do want to say, take some of this data. I can't promise perfection. I think that we're trying to do the best we can, but I did just download some data from Apartment List that goes through last week in terms of median rents in Tucson, and then which is an estimate. And then also through Zillow, just downloaded their most recent file of home values. And I think that with the look at 2020 and 2021, when you see that between 27 and 2021, the median rent rose by 31% and home values rose by 48%. And then this was a chart from the housing market study, but like Phoenix did, wanted to add in what is our current average rent and our median home value. So really trying to put this in perspective a bit more. And one suggestion that somebody had for me that I would love help on too is, it's one thing to see this chart, but if we can do case studies and really find somebody who's a part-time retail worker and hear more about their story, that it really helps put this information in a different context. And so that's something that I'm really interested in doing throughout this, is really trying to have people share stories if they're willing to share stories that are in these different categories. And so in terms of estimating need, I think there's a few different ways to do that. And I think the housing cost burden data is really important in showing what the need is. And so, again, this is specific to Tucson. This is not the region. So if you see different numbers, it's probably because of Pima County versus Tucson. But what we know is 52,000 households. This is a couple years old. It's the most up-to-date data. And so my guess is these numbers would be quite a bit higher today. But as of a couple of years ago, 52,000 households that rent in Tucson are housing cost burden. And then about 24,000 owner households are cost burden, for a total of over 75,000. And so what we know, what we're comfortable saying is that the 75,000 is the estimated number of Tucson who are cost burden, and that we need to find housing affordability solutions for them. And then in terms of the gap analysis, what does it look like in terms of number of units? And so as part of the housing market study, we put this together. When you actually go look at this online, you can see number of households for these different categories. And to summarize what I feel like this diagram shows is, so if you're on the lower income earnings, there's really few units that are less than $500 in rent. And so we know that there's not nearly enough units for the extremely low income households. We also can tell this diagram, when you stare at it long enough, as guilty as I've done, you also can see that higher earning households really end up taking the lower rent units. And so it really ends up crunching the affordable housing. And so based on all of that and based on the housing cost burden, that's where we're getting the really needing to find housing affordability solutions. And I think that there's a few different ways to think about that. I think that if we could have higher incomes in Tucson, if we could potentially provide more subsidy in Tucson, but what this plan is focused on is units, whether, Megan, I liked your clarification, whether it's creating new units or preserving what we have, because we don't want to lose affordable units and we don't want to lose units into disrepair and have them not be habitable. And then the last, in terms of the data, we do want to not ignore the fact that in Tucson, we do have a housing segregation problem that's really based on the racist legacy throughout the country and housing's racist legacy. And so really open to information, working with the Housing Segregation Subcommittee on what this data looks like. But I think that there will be a map that shows that racially, ethnically around Tucson is very divided. And then we know that homeowner rates, this was part of the P-CHIP plan. So definitely open for other ideas on ways to share that information. And so one thing, we did spend a lot of time, did a lot of engagement with the People, Communities, and Homes investment plan. Actually, let me back up. Any questions on the data or thoughts? And curious what people think, given that it's a Tucson focused plan. Do I include Tucson data and county data? Just thoughts on that I'm open to.
I like this so far, and I think it's always helpful to have like you did in some of the graphs, Pima compared to Tucson. But I think that having the Tucson focus is really essential, because I feel the housing market in the urban core is a completely different animal, and I feel like it's going to need its own strategies. Like, you know, I really feel like it's also the problem of existing infrastructure and urban infill, which is really hard to do. And so, I mean, I think that's part of what I'm hoping we can start to accomplish in this subcommittee, is really looking at how difficult it is and why most of the new housing happens in the county, because it is really hard to make these projects work. And I think there's just so much public education that needs to happen with existing neighborhoods, because they get up in arms about any kind of development. And it just continues to push development outside the city. So I really think that there's a lot. I think the city focus is really appropriate. And I think that we have a different set of issues in the inner city.
Okay.
Can I just interject something in here? I agree with you to a point, Shay, but at the same time, there's a lot of blurred border lines, because if you think about South Tucson and how it's landlocked within the city. So and if you're not including South Tucson, then you're missing that part, because I see a lot of development coming here, and they're having the same issues that a lot of communities in the city boundaries have. And then also the fact that we're also looking at funding. And when you look at how much the county provides and how much the city provides in these areas, obviously the city gets a lot more federal funding for affordable housing. But at the same time, the county also gets funding. And if we want them to participate in funding the areas where there's been inequity, such as, the quarters that have been neglected by the city and the county, then we should want to make sure that the county's funding is going into those areas proportionate to the need, and not to that's city and we're county. So in that sense, I think that we really need to look at whether or not we should include the county. I know Marcos is on here. Marcos, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I agree that, on looking at data, there should be a focus on City of Tucson. It is a city plan, so that just makes sense. But I think the balance of the county needs to be taken into consideration, looking at, building patterns, as Shay had mentioned, and then when considering the other funding sources as well, both from Pima County and other jurisdictions in the state that might be available as resources. And so, yeah, but as you have started framing the plan now, I think it's great, and there should be a certain level of focus on the city data and in addressing, the issues and patterns that, the data is revealing.
Thanks, that's helpful. Thank you, Marcos and Betty and Shay. Jim, I'll say I'm getting caught up on the chat. And you made me laugh in part. Allison and Corin have probably heard me say this a million times. The poverty and urban stress name is not my favorite, in part because of that acronym. And so you made me laugh if we have multiple terrible acronym names. There's other reasons why I don't love the name, the Poverty and Urban Stress Report, but anyway, okay, moving on, and I'll keep going, and then feel free to open it up for any feedback. On PCHIP, I'm gonna go through this pretty quickly. This is a summary of what's in PCHIP. So PCHIP, for those that don't know, Mayor and Council adopted it in January. It's our People, Communities, and Homes Investment Plan, which is an extension of what was our Human Services Plan, but Liz understandably really asked that it be more of a guiding document for the department. And so thinking about what Housing Community Development does, really wanted to focus on these three areas. So the homes section, so the way the plan's laid out, there's priorities and goals and strategies. And the homes section includes 4 goals, 4 priority areas related to housing. The first one is to increase affordable rental housing, and the first goal is to preserve and improve existing affordable rental housing units, and there's some strategies listed below that. This is a summary of what's in there. And then the second goal is to expand the supply. So first preserve to expand. And so I'm sharing this in part, these really helped inform what are the draft goals for this plan. And then the second category, so first one's about rental housing, second one's about expanding affordable home ownership. So reducing barriers to home ownership, reduce threats to stable home ownership, and then expand supply of affordable home ownership. The third priority area that was laid out in PCHIP is ensure stable, healthy, and safe housing. It's a little bit of a catch-all because there was a bunch of things we really wanted to include. But first one is ensuring access to healthy, safe, and sustainable housing. 2 is try to reduce and mitigate evictions and foreclosures. And I do want to point out this bullet. As we move along, you'll see some of the programs that mayor and council have been talking about in terms of ARPA funding, and this one-stop shop idea is something that potentially could be funded through ARPA. And then the third goal, support the ability of older people to age in place. We really felt like it was important to articulate that. And then the fourth priority when it comes to the home section is to increase equitable housing. And this is where really looking at reducing housing segregation and its effects. And then second goal is to target affordable housing investments in priority areas. A lot more laid out. I didn't want to lose that, but also feel like really want to more focus on specific actions that mayor and council can help take now. And so that's the reason for what will be the goal section in this plan. And I'll say one of the things that we did say in PCHIP is PCHIP just scratched the surface, and we really needed a more comprehensive housing plan, which is what this is. So that's PCHIP. I feel like in this plan need to reference it, we need to lay out, these can absolutely evolve and be updated over time, but didn't want to lose sight of this, which was already adopted. So section 4, jumping right into funding, couple slides to share, and this is city specific, well, almost city specific. The annual funding for affordable housing, and I say almost city specific because the home program funding is the city and county share that we get each year. So this is the approximate annual funding that goes towards housing. Of course, the big bucket is the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 program, and then the public housing that helps ensure we have a little over 1,500 units of public housing. And then there's the rescue plan dollars. So this slide is specific to HUD related or housing related projects or funding. So the first one being the home program that we're getting almost 13 million for that. That is mostly focused on housing for persons experiencing homelessness and some other qualified populations. But there's a lot of, I don't want to give the idea that we can just build affordable housing and or use it for gap financing for any affordable housing, because it really does have to be targeted specific to qualified populations. And then this is the emergency housing vouchers that we've been working on. And then this is the rent and utility assistance program that has been going on for a bit. And then this is I feel like where there's a lot of opportunity and kind of the real exciting piece of where we have some funding we had never had before. So this is the state and local fiscal recovery fund of ARPA. And yesterday during study session, mayor and council voted to approve the framework for the first year. And so in that framework, they have $9,250,000 dedicated to promoting affordable and stable housing. And again, this is for the first year. And what they did, and I'm really excited that this is where the conversation went. On the right is what they've been talking about, but they didn't want to lock in those dollar amounts for those programs. They felt like they wanted to provide some more flexibility in terms of depending on how these programs go and how our partners the capacity of our partners to deliver some of these programs. And so the number to really keep in mind at this point is for year one, there's a little over 9 million that will be dedicated to promoting affordable and stable housing. That said, what they have been talking about is this top item, and this is where this subcommittee and the commission, I think, will really get to weigh in. They've been talking about a housing cooperative development fund. And so what the conversations are is this an extension or a new part of the housing trust fund that can be used potentially for some gap financing or loans or other types of programs. So there's a lot of these categories aren't specifically spelled out yet, and would love input on any of this. Some money dedicated towards smaller scale development specific for senior and youth. And then some potentially operating money towards a one-stop shop idea in terms of thinking about finding housing, eviction prevention. And Ray is on this call from HCD. He's been working on possibly some sort of manufactured housing program to try to get more units and or to beef up. We do have our homeowner rehab program that some of the funding does go towards manufactured housing. And so potentially some programs around that. And then 5 million dedicated towards affordable housing acquisition and or again, potentially gap financing or other ways. But I know the city right now, given everything, is really focused on trying to get land, as we know that that's one of the ways we can really support affordable housing development. And then 2 million towards our, as you all know, the city has purchases in process with the county on purchasing a couple hotels as for bridge housing. And so we are looking at some money for the operations of those hotels. So this is, again, on the right is more of a draft working. And I'm interested in this plan, kind of trying to map out what this funding can go to and should go to. And so we'll be really interested in feedback on any of that. So any questions on that or thoughts on that?
And when you were talking about it for the affordable housing programming / acquisition, you stated it as just acquisition. Is there intention behind the programming? I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, and honestly, there has not been a lot of detail for any of this. That's the way it was. My understanding was focused on acquisition, particularly around transit corridors and thinking about mayor and council other priorities, but the way in which it's the line item right now is called programming and acquisition. So open to ideas and feedback.
Yeah, I think we'll have to know more to be able to provide that feedback. Thank you, though.
Okay, I'm gonna start going through. I realize it's 5:30 and I want to make sure I leave you all time to talk about your goals, but real quick, I'll do a crash course in what we're thinking in terms of identifying more specific actions that mayor and council or the city or in collaboration with community partners can do now. So the first one, many of you have heard us talking about moving our public housing from what was an older model to what Housing and Urban Development is really encouraging us to move towards a newer model, which ideally over time would create more sustainable funding systems. I have names, so this is how much of a draft this is. Nona, Eth, and HCD is the main person working on this, so she'll provide more detailed information on what that looks like, but I'm really approaching this as we need to take care of what we have now and also think about how to support more development for the future. So first is on the city's public housing transformation. Second goal, again, this is a bit rough, but mayor and council have asked us to really look towards more self-development. And so thinking through what that looks like and how we get there, I will say right now we don't have in-house experience to do that. So I think that means we'll be looking at more co-development opportunities over the next couple of years. We're not going to go out and try to start building stuff tomorrow. And so issuing more RFPs for co-development opportunities. They have asked that we look at setting up a community development corporation or a nonprofit, and we are working on that now in terms of figuring out what's the best tool. And then this one is me slipping in there that I do think we need a dedicated staff member focused on this because if we want to really make some progress, that's got to happen.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sorry. Absolutely.
Do you know what the intention is behind the internal trying to do it, within the city versus looking at just partnering with groups already doing this?
I don't. This is direction from mayor and council, and my suspicion, and I think we will always need to partner on and support a lot of what's happening out in the community. I think some of it is just just an acknowledgement that in general, affordable housing often requires subsidies. And so really trying to figure out how to leverage funding and make more units happen is my best guess.
Okay, I misunderstood that then. I thought it was, the intention was potentially for the city to do more on their own versus working with.
I think that is the intention, and I think that doesn't necessarily mean it excluding continuing to support others. I think the need is big enough that they're looking at continuing to support where we can, and also looking to do more self-development.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving to, there's 10 goals like Phoenix, I should say. 3 is really looking at how do we preserve existing affordable housing units and thinking through what we're doing now, continuing to support the things we're doing now, expand them. And so the 3rd bullet is something that right now don't have funding for, but something I've heard from a lot of people in the community is really looking at trying to make funding available for rehabilitation programs for existing rental housing buildings. We know that the rental stock is getting older. And so some, again, have no concrete plans here, but what we know is people, when they're rehabilitating, they're increasing rents, or they're stopping, they will sometimes stop taking vouchers. And so really thinking about how the city can support continuing affordability. And so still working on lots of this and open to a lot of feedback. 4 is thinking through where we prioritize affordable housing development. And so we are in process of creating a checklist, and this is something that will be a draft that we'll be looking for input on, but really thinking about creating a scoring criteria that helps us when we're looking at potential property acquisition opportunities. Also, as part of our public housing transformation, we are looking at potentially just getting rid of some of our single family homes, and then taking the proceeds from that and building more multifamily in areas that are easier to maintain. And we are looking at where does it make sense to get rid of our single family homes and where doesn't it. If we're saying this is an area that's really good for affordable housing, we may not want to, the city may not want to sell, or we want to make sure they're going to a nonprofit that will continue affordability. And then last, some of you have heard me saying this, and we're getting closer to really thinking through an application process for home and potentially other funding sources that's more aligned with all of these strategic priorities that mayor and council have laid out. And so I think this checklist will really help with that. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here now on this, but Corin Manning is here today from Planning and Development Services, and there are a couple goals related to how the city may be able to support development through potentially upzoning, potentially doing overlays that could upzone areas, or other types of relief from things like setbacks, lot coverage. And Corin, feel free to jump in there. I know PDSD is thinking through what might be possibilities on that. That, and then this next slide too is how do we help developers reduce costs and make more units happen. So definitely thinking through what those opportunities can be. And when we have our stakeholder session focused on developers, we'll really be asking what are the current challenges, and what can the city and mayor and council take action on that could really help. I see Jim just unmuted.
Going back to that last slide.
This one?
Actually, go to the previous slide. Okay.
This one?
Yeah, relief. So
these are just me brainstorming here too.
Yeah, no, I mean these are all really good things. You know, one of the things that Ann and I have been talking about in the background is, you know, there is a bit of sense of urgency on getting this put together, because there's the new QAP has just been released. So they just released the second draft of the QAP, I think last Friday. And they're trying to get it finalized by the end of this month for an April 1st submittal. And, you know, one of the reasons that I joined this commission to begin with was I've always felt like Tucson doesn't get its fair share of affordable housing projects. You know, when you compare Tucson to Phoenix and our populations, you know, we are underserved in that program. And so, you know, I want to try to figure out how, as a city, we can compete better with the guys up north and, you know, maybe start to get a little bit more of that market share. You know, the low-income housing tax credit program is not the only program out there that can fund this, but it's by far the biggest and most utilized. And it is a very established program. So, you know, I think that like the zoning codes that you listed, Ann, are all good. Anything that we can do in general to make development easier is gonna help. But, you know, going back to the LIHTC program, it is a competitive process. And one of the things I would like to maybe do, I don't think we're gonna have time to do it in this meeting, so maybe we put it off to the next meeting, is to review this, the new QAP, and go through the point categories and talk about what are things that the city of Tucson and this area can do to kind of get a leg up on Phoenix. And I'm guessing that we might be able to move a little bit faster than those guys. I don't know if they're paying as much attention to what's happening right now. So, but the new QAP is a significant change, and it's, you know, nobody really knows how it's gonna come out this first year in terms of where projects will get awarded.
One thing though, Jim, to add to that, when I was at the housing forum, it seemed I missed the very end, but I sat through the beginning of the QAP discussion. It seems though that in general, they are trying to make it way easier for developers. They've taken away a lot of the restrictions, that a lot of the things that designers and people on all ends were complaining about. And I think, to me, it seems like it's a positive move, because again, I just feel like the less red tape there is, the less complicated that these ordinances are, the more likely they're going to get used and be able to be deployed quicker. So, I mean, for me personally, we have the zoning code, right? But then we also have all these ordinances that keep getting added on. There's the inclusive home design ordinance. There's the solar readiness ordinance. Now there's an EV charging station ordinance. And so again, we're at this point where, like, we went through this whole effort to get the UDC consolidated, everything under one plan. And now it's, again, all these add-ons getting tacked on. It's just, I hate, and I've talked to some folks at Development Services, and they're like, you know, we actually would prefer to move to a form-based code and have something that's just much simpler and easy to work with. I don't know if there's potential. You know, I don't know that anyone wants to do a full overhaul, but I do, but I do feel like Development Services and you know, it can be a major barrier. It's just, again, it's like all these boxes you have to check just to get a permit, and that's just one phase of the process, right? Like,
well, let me Jason, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Go ahead.
I just had a quick comment, because we have already been through the full QAP over the weekend. The cities will ultimately decide, the municipalities will decide who wins and who loses in the QAP round. It's a 200-point matrix, and 40 points lie with the municipalities in terms of what they're calling local gap financing, and also assistance, rental assistance. There's 40 points tied to those two categories. So if you don't have those two categories tied up, you won't win. The other thing is, we can talk about development services all we want. I haven't had many problems with development services. It's the fire marshal that tends to cause us the most headache at times. So, I mean, there is a slew of challenges, and every developer has them. I just think that there's no way you're going to consolidate everybody lined up with everybody's interest perfectly aligned to develop affordable housing. But Jim is right. We did a study over the last 5 years of the number of units and number of projects and number of funds, tax credits that were awarded to Pima County, and it is out of balance with population significantly. But the problem is, we don't fall within the balance of state set-asides where we get some of the special treatment or special scoring categories, or even a set-aside. Last year, the 3 lowest scoring projects were in the balance of state and the tribal, and all 5 of them won because they were in set-asides. Pima County drew one project if you don't count the tribes, and that happens every single year. It's not a surprise. Tucson is at a somewhat of a disadvantage. It's tertiary areas like Marana and Vail and Green Valley sometimes don't have the transportation needed to score, but they're still in the MSA. So we've made a number of comments to the Department of Housing to try to help Tucson and Pima County in general. But even with the new QAP is developer friendly, and be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. As developer friendly as it is, there are all kinds of potential pitfalls in it. There are all types of potential points of contention. I'm thinking of the transportation being measured by drive distance now and not straight line radius. And where's the entrance off of the parking lot? And is it 2.1 miles or is it 2 miles or is it 1.9 miles? And what's a medical clinic? And does this urgent care qualify? And is that grocery store qualify even though it's not a Fry's or even though it's not a Safeway? And you start getting into these nuances. It's going to be the developer game. But at the end of the day, Tucson's going to be responsible for 40 points for every application that goes in. They're going to be responsible for how much money they provide in gap financing, up to 20,000 per unit, which is the maximum scoring. And they're going to be responsible for the vouchers that they supply in terms of subsidy. That is the bottom line. You want to get to the bottom line, brass tacks? That's it.
Right. So kind of where I was going, Jason, with some of my thoughts are, some of these incentives and things, waiving impact fees and things like that, those are all fine and good, but they need to be done in a way where it counts as a contribution from the city to the project so that it can help score. I mean, if it doesn't help score and get the award, then a lot of it's going to be for naught.
Yeah, Jim, I think if you look at I think there's 4 additional categories in the city contribution section. There is the very last piece talks about any additional compensation that you can argue for. Basically, I mean, it's a 5-pointer, and I really think that Tucson's done a great job with the impact fee waivers for affordable housing. I mean, obviously, we were much more happy when it was the full waiver, when it wasn't broken up by percentage. I mean, that really helped our West Point project. That really helped our Miracle Point project. I mean, those were huge impact fee areas, and we got great relief. We still get relief on a couple of them, but now it's down to like 20% through the new calculation. But impact fee waivers are significant, especially in some of these higher impact fee areas. And I think there's a way, Jim, to argue that. I think that argument might be made more towards the Department of Housing, because I think Tucson is doing a good job of providing that relief.
So I have a few questions. How do we have the data as to how much Phoenix has to spend on gap financing versus Tucson, and then what Tucson has to spend on that gap financing?
Yes, and Jim, do you want to provide just an overview on how Phoenix does their LIHTC gap financing?
Sure, sorry, Mary Ann Beerling just was calling me. Her phone died, so she apologized. She's gonna try to get back in a little bit. So the question was, how does Phoenix do their home fund?
Yeah, well, Shay was asking, do we know how much Phoenix contributes to what Tucson contributes? And
Well,
since
I know
we just had
Phoenix
this conversation, I
typically-
think you're good.
Yeah, so Phoenix typically has either, I think it's $5 or $6 million in home fund financing that they provide each year. So they do an RFP process typically in January or February, and they'll turn it around in a couple weeks so that whoever receives those awards can basically claim that credit on their application for LIHTC projects. And you know, the old QAP, everything was based off of a tiebreaker, which was leveraging of tax credits. So the more outside sources you brought, the more leverage your tax credits were, and the higher likelihood you're going to get an award. So, but I don't know, I haven't heard. My guess is they're going to probably follow that same process again. So, you know, I think we need to kind of go in with the understanding that there's going to be probably between 4 and 6 submittals in Phoenix that are going to have $1 million from the city as a home fund award, award.
You know, Jim, one of the things that we did is after last year's round, we obviously did some asking around, and in the manipulation of that tiebreaker over the last couple of years, one of the advantages that Phoenix had was Phoenix demands higher rents. So when you have those higher rents, you can get more leverage.
Right.
And also, I believe, and I talked to Joe Keeper at Native American Connection specifically, but he was able to underwrite his current deal, I believe, at it was subsidized. It had vouchers, but he was actually at market rent, which is a significant advantage.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what allowances or what of the how they were able to do that with the city of Phoenix and their home funds and their vouchers, but being able to demand a market rent with a subsidized unit, well, that's a huge advantage. I mean,
Well, so I think what Joe did, that was he submitted on that Deck Park project, and that was a RFP that the city of Phoenix put out, where they had an old dilapidated apartment complex that they wanted to redevelop into multifamily, and so they basically were provided. There was project-based vouchers there, and so they were given the land and the project-based vouchers, and so I think with the vouchers, that's how they were able to recognize the market rents. That's probably the way it went.
well, he has a tremendous amount of leverage on that deal. I mean, huge leverage. It's a $35 million deal, 131 units. I mean, and his tiebreaker ratio was 5.6%. I mean, that's tremendous equity pricing, tremendous leverage, and tremendous soft layers, all three combined, and a $35 million deal.
Right.
You would never see that here in Tucson. I don't care how you scrunch the numbers. I don't care how you tried to make that work. That would be extremely difficult.
Right.
Okay, I just have a couple more goals. I'll just share you a snippet of what we're thinking about for those. I realize it's getting on in time. So this also will be really curious to hear feedback from you all and thinking about potential innovations in terms of housing that we'll want to include. 7th goal, you've heard that the city has a lot of property, whether or not it's us developing it or giving it. We know that we want to get city land moving for housing, and so this will be phased, similar to what Phoenix has done. We're working on 4 sites now. We have feasibility studies in the works for a few more sites, and as I mentioned, we're looking at property acquisition. This one is not very fleshed out yet, but just really wanting to recognize that it's important to continue to support partners who are really helping provide housing for important vulnerable population groups in Tucson. 9, and this is this subcommittee, one of your specific goals, which is a good transition back to talk about your subcommittee goals, is thinking about, well, right now there's more funding than there had been. We don't know how long that's going to last, and we know that the need is definitely far greater than the resources available. So long term, what are potential other funding sources we can look to? And then we'll be want to make sure education and outreach is a part of whatever we do. So that is all. May have a section on implementation monitoring, haven't decided yet, but that's where we're at. So I know it's a lot, but we'll really asking for your input as this goes along.
Can you send out a draft? Are you comfortable doing that or not?
I feel like it needs a little more work. This is really draft, but I can certainly share kind of the outline and the thoughts in terms of the higher level, but some of it's just my brain dumping into it. So I'll share something. It just may not have my random thoughts in it.
I made that. This is awesome. I appreciate all the work that you've already put into it. I would agree with Jason and Jim, though, that there's like some critical timing around the QAP process, and that is going to be the thing that's probably going to drive a bunch of new development coming up next year. And so if there is an opportunity for us to push that forward sooner rather than later and talk about specifically how, you know, the city, what could be done there in terms of supporting, you know, either that's in the vouchers or in the home funds or what that looks like. But I think that's probably a really critical need for us to try and push sooner rather than later.
Hey, Anne, you know, there is still a comment period and a feedback period to the Department of Housing. And I think one of the things they added in their second draft was a list of underserved areas with zip codes, based on zip codes. Is that something that you or the housing department had any input on?
No.
That might be something you want to look at, and if you think there's other zip codes that should be included in that list, because it's worth 10 points.
Yeah. Yes. It's an 85705 and 85701 are listed as non-qualifying zip codes.
Do we know how it's determined?
I have no idea.
I have no idea how they came up with that list. So Jason, you're saying 85701 and 05 are non-qualified?
05 and 01 are both ineligible for the points.
Why?
You're asking me.
They're on the list.
I know.
But they're not, are they not in a QCT or?
So much for thriving, huh?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really detrimental for the Thrive in the 05 and the Oracle Choice neighborhoods and all that work.
Jim, when our comments due on the second round, we did provide input on the first round, but clearly there's.
You can provide them whenever you want, Ann. You can send them in right now if you wanted.
Okay, is there a deadline though?
I don't know when the next draft's coming out. You know when the next draft's coming out, Jim?
I don't. I was going to try to send my comments in by tomorrow. There's a funky thing on the bottom about senior housing projects that says that all type B units have to be fully accessible on senior deals, and I didn't understand that.
Yeah, it's right here, Jim. ADOH will award 10 points to applications which are not located in any of the following zip codes.
Oh, so they're okay. You know how they came up with that, Jason? That's the list of zip codes that received awards the last 2 years or something.
Well, that's what I was assuming, because we've done a number of deals in 01 and 05, and that's what I was assuming. But why would that be an incentive? Like, for example, Tucson, Tucson has the whole Thrive in the L5 initiative. The whole idea is to add units to that area.
Right, I misread it. I thought you got 10 points for those areas.
No,
You get 10 points if you're not.
Yeah, it's written in the negative, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, that's probably something that you might want to respond to, Ann.
Yeah, thank you for that heads up.
Yeah, I think it would be great at the next meeting to just dive into the QAP. I think it would be really helpful for everyone on the call. Could we just have maybe that be the main agenda item?
I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think it'd be really good to get David and Sally on the next call, because they're you know, like Jason. I mean, I'm an ancillarily involved, but those guys are living and breathing this stuff every day. So
Yeah, we sent our comments in at 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. So I think they were surprised, though they did respond to us and thanked us on Saturday.
that's funny.
Yeah, I think after the QAP discussion, because I think that's hot right now, it's like needs to go out soon, but soon after, I'd love also a deeper conversation similar to what Marcos is talking about, is kind of development, you know, corporations in general. Tucson doesn't have a CDE, you know, the Community Development, CDC, Community Development Corporation. I don't know that there's, you know, has been one in Tucson. But also, I'm also keep thinking about, you know, the Arizona IDA and their relationship to the Arizona Housing Trust Fund and how they fund actually that piece. And I keep wondering if we can, you know, make similar relationships in Tucson with, you know, we have an IDA in Tucson, we have a county IDA, you know, we have other tools, other partnerships, other entities that could exist. Yeah, but again, I think those are longer term strategies, not immediate, but those are some of the other questions I have.
Can I interject for a second? If the QAP is something that everybody wants to talk about and time is of the essence in doing so, if we're scheduling these meetings for the third Wednesday of a month, you've got 6 weeks until the next meeting. That's my only thought.
I think that's okay, because I mean, the QAP is really not going to be finalized until the end of the year. So, you know, some of the stuff is still subject to change.
Hey, Jim, I talked to Ruby and she said they're going to try to have the QAP at the governor's office November 1st.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She expects it to be signed by either the 8th or no later than the week of the 8th.
Okay. Well, should we try to maybe we should try to reconvene on, I don't know, in 3 weeks. If we do it on the 27th, that would give us 3 weeks, and then we'd have another 3 weeks before the 17th.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's fine. I would, but I would encourage the city to definitely respond between now and then on the zip codes.
Yeah, I just was looking at it. It's interesting that they call it underserved areas, rural balance of state. So definitely something we'll chime in on.
Thank you, Shay, for putting this together and leading it, and good job on your draft presentation.
So when did you just say the 20, Allison is taking over, taking notes from me, but when are you thinking? You're thinking 3 weeks, so the 27th, which is the same week that I'm planning on a bunch of engagement outreach opportunities. And so, you know, as part of that is the stakeholder session geared towards developers. We can absolutely have an item on how the city can help support more projects, but just a heads up that that's that same week that hopefully we'll get some good engagement around.
Well, maybe we should do the 3rd. I'm actually on a flight at that time as well. What do you think, Shay? Do you want to try to do it on the 3rd, the next one on the 3rd, and then we'll switch?
Yeah, I'm okay with that if everyone else is.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good.
Yeah, I think it's an important document that we always don't have enough time to respond to. The other thing the other item, I don't know, Allison or and if you either of you have, I remember before it was an issue also with the code with the choice. Is there any conflict there anymore with having 2 choice projects in Arizona? Is that?
There's still only one. They're only.
We commented, we'll comment again.
Yeah, they're only recognizing one of those.
Right, so that's already been addressed. Okay, because that was another ongoing issue, I remember.
I mean, I would say it hasn't been addressed ideally for, you know, it would be much better if there was 2 set-asides for choice, in Tucson's humble opinion. All right, Shay, anything else? You're in charge around here.
No, I think that's it. Unless anyone has anything else, I think it'd be great to dive into the QAP as its own item for next month. So I think that's enough just for one meeting, because it's a lot. There's a lot in there. It's a lot to take in.
So you guys will send out an invitation for the meeting again? Okay, thank you.
And sounds like the October 20th, 3rd week is what I heard last.
Yeah, and they may even have they're supposed to have a 3rd draft out sometime this month. I would assume it would come out mid-month, so there may actually be a new draft to discuss on the 20th if they want it signed by the governor by the 1st week in November.
Yeah, I think we talked about maybe doing a, because it's 6 weeks out, trying to do a meeting on the 3rd, and we can kind of adjust it back to the 3rd weekend for that.
Thank you, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I don't want to conflict with your schedule, Anne, and I think it's okay that we have the meetings back to back for the next couple months, and then yeah, we can change it moving forward.
Okay. All right, thank you all.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk to you guys soon.